everybody, Brenda Paulson here with my Pastor's Wife Designs, and today I wanted to show you a card that is truly my style and a lot of fun. And I know that sometimes collage type cards can seem really overwhelming, and I just want to show you just how quick and easy it is to put together a card like this, and also to feature some of our really great stamps. The one stamp set that we are going to be using is called Sea of Textures. It's this stamp set, and it can be found on page 155 of the annual catalog. And along with that, we will be using the Under the Sea framelits. I recommend you buy this as a bundle because you get the 10% discount, and you always want to have your framelits with your stamp sets. It's just worth it. And then we will also be using some designer series paper from the same page, 155, the Tranquil Textures, and I've actually cut this piece down. You can see that it has some great colors, so we'll have that. The other stamp set we will be using is going to be our Very Vintage stamp set. This can be found on page 227 of the annual catalog. I absolutely love this set. It is a host set, so you will have to spend $150 in order to qualify to purchase it, but when you do qualify, it's $13.50, so that is a great deal for a stamp set that would typically be around $22. If you don't want to spend the $150, get a couple friends to go in together with you on an order, place it, and then you can order this stamp set. And truly, I highly recommend it. I love the different vintage options that you have here. So those are the stamp sets that we will be using. And then also just some crumb cake paper, some Whisper White, a doily, and just a few other things. But let's go ahead and get started with our stamping and not just chatting. So I'm going to set this out of my way. First thing that we want to do is, of course, our stamping. So I have a piece of crumb cake, and it is cut at 8.5 by 5.5, and then scored at 4 1/4. I'm going to go ahead and give this a nice crease so that we have it. And I am going to open it up because we will be wanting to stamp on the inside of this. And then I also have my 2 pieces of white. And then this piece is going to be cut at 3 inches by 5 1/4. And so these are the pieces that we will be stamping on. Let's go ahead and start with our Old Olive. I love this color. I think it always is a great one to go with vintage or like your old style Gothic. And I don't mean the black goth, but I mean your Gothic styles of the Victorian era. We're going to use the rose stamp, and we'll start by just inking this up with our Old Olive. I'm going to ink that up. I'm just going to push this aside for a moment. I'm just going to hit the corner of this. I don't want to do the whole thing because I want to have room to write what I want to say in it. And then I'm going to set this aside for a few moments until we're ready to come back to it. And then while we still have that stamp out, we are going to use our designer series paper. This is also cut at about 3 inches by 5 1/4. And on this one, I want to kind of hit this at an angle, but I want to leave this corner bare so we can stamp a sentiment. So I'm going to give that 1, and then I'm going to ink it up and do it again. And 2, and it can be random. It doesn't have to be perfect. I love that particular stamp. It reminds me of the old school toile that you used to see different scenes and stuff, country scenes and that sort of thing, especially in wallpaper and stuff. Now we're going to use our doily stamp, and that is this one right here, again using the Old Olive. I'm going to just ink that up, and then I want to put one doily kind of right in the center, and then I'll stamp off. I'll go ahead and use, and then I'll use it twice, and then I'm going to stamp that off so that I just get a lighter image. I like that because it almost gives me the idea that I've got 2 separate colors going on. And then also we are going to stamp our sentiment, and it's going to be "You're a Blessing." And I will be using the Old Olive, and it will go right down here in the corner, just like that. So we've got that, and we're going to set those aside for just a moment, and we will go ahead and pull out our black memento. You can use whatever black you want. Right now, the memento is my favorite. And we will be using the Octopus stamp, which, like I said, is probably one of my all-time favorites. Octopus are my favorite animal, so it stands to reason that this would be a favorite. Okay, so we're going to get him good and inked up. I always like to double check my stamp just to make sure it's really inky, so I don't have to go back and do it again. And then I'm going to just press this on here, and I'm going to let it sit for just a second or two extra because the paper will pull the ink off the stamp, which is really nice. And you get a much nicer image. All right, there we go. And Viola, that is what I was hoping for. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to go ahead and get our framelit. And it is the Octopus. It looks like this. And we're going to use the Big Shot to cut that out. I think a lot of you know how to use a Big Shot, but not everybody does. And so it's always nice to see how these are used. So we're going to pull the Big Shot up here. And I have some very well-loved, well-used plates right now because I had been doing a whole bunch of wedding invitations. So we're going to go ahead and set this down here, and we will be using the magnetic plate, which is awesome, the platform, because then nothing moves, which is so great when you're trying to get a nice precise cut. And that looks pretty good. So then we'll put our other plate on top of this, and then just give it a nice roll through your Big Shot. Sometimes you can come back through, just that way you know for sure you got a good cut, and pull it out of here. Just going to get that off of here, set my Big Shot back out of my way, and we'll just pop him out of there, and that's what we have left. Oh, actually, let's just throw that away, pop that out, and if there's any pieces that didn't get pulled out, you can weed it, but mine are all out, so that's good. So now we want to pull in our crumb cake ink and a sponge, and I've cut mine in quarter or sixths, and then I put a binder clip around it, and it just makes it so easy to sponge the things that I want to sponge. So before we sponge, take this piece that you stamped your doilies on and tear your edge here. You can do it however you want. I like to pull towards me because I like the edge it gives me, and then it's my preference. So let's go ahead and ink this sponge up. We're going to go ahead and just come in and add some sponging and some texture. And you know, I don't know the correct term. I've said shabby chic, I have said grunge, I've said vintage, I've said steampunk. The point is we're adding some age to this and just more, I don't know, layers, texture, color, whatever you want to call it. We're sponging it. So, you know, people come up with fancy names for these. I don't think that's necessary. I see how this, with the extra thick cardstock, you get some really fun colors and layers. So yeah, that's why I use the thick. And then we're going to go ahead and just sponge around this as well. And finally, we want to sponge our little octopus because we don't want that bright glaring white to stand out on the card. It would look out of place. So just give that a nice sponge, cover that white up and get it kind of muddy looking. Okay, before we start assembling, you want to get your Wink of Stella pen. This is the clear one. And then I'm just going to go over the tentacles. Not the arms necessarily, but the tentacles that are kind of showing, and just gives them a little bit of glimmer, glitter, shine, sparkle, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that's fun. It just, again, adds to the vintage look. Now we are ready for assembly. So first things first, let's go ahead and get our card over here. I'm going to use snail, and I like to use a reasonable amount. Okay, so let's go ahead and mount this on this side and just leave an edge about like that. Do more or less whatever you like. Now, I have a whole doily here, and I'm just going to tear it mostly in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't think it's necessary for it to be perfect. And then again, I will use some snail. And I want to set this, oh, I don't know, just about right there. Just eyeball it. And then we want to put this layer on top of this. I use a fair amount of snail when I'm doing these projects because most of them I mail or I sell in a boutique. And I want to make sure that people are going to be able to mail them. You never know what your weather and temperatures are going to be like and how that will affect your adhesive. So, you know, if you just add a little bit of extra, you know it's going to get there and be in one piece. Okay, so the next kind of fun thing we're going to do is we're going to use this Terran tape. We're just going to come along this outside edge here all the way down. Give it a quick little tear. I love the Terran tape. It works so fast. And then I'm going to use my paper piercer to slide that under that backing, and it peels it right up. And that way you don't have to fight with your fingers if they're arthritic or anything like that. And then one of my favorite ribbons is this rich raspberry, and it looks like crushed velvet. Well, I think it is crushed velvet. I love this stuff. A, it's perfect for the really vintage look, and B, it is it just brings back good memories from when I was a kid, and my mom used to wear these really cool crushed velvet jeans. Yeah, so that goes back to like the 70s. I'm going to cut this piece of ribbon at 5 1/4. And then I'm just going to lay it down here on this edge where we just put the Terran tape. And do you just love this kind of purpley raspberry color with the green? I think that the old olive and the pinks and purples are so pretty in the vintage stuff. Okay, so next we are going to get this this ribbon, and it is called Copper Trim. One of my favorite products that we have. I'm going to cut about 9 inches, and I know that seems like a lot, but when you see what we're going to do, you'll understand. Okay, so I've cut 9 inches of it, and you see how thin and pretty it is, and you could tie a bow or whatever. We're going to make this like netting. So we're going to actually come to the top of this and just pull this apart. You see how it separates and stretches, and I just think this is the coolest ribbon. It's really versatile. There's a lot you can do with it, and it shapes nicely too. So when you do tie a ribbon, you can kind of get it to do your thing, the thing you want it to do instead of the thing it wants it to do. So you see how I've got this kind of, almost reminds you of a net, right? I always think of those fancy netted gloves that ladies used to wear. So that is about like that. And then I want to just kind of lay it on here where, kind of like that. And I will just stick a couple spots of snail down just to adhere it until I get my octopus on it. So you can just see how that lays there, another layer. And then finally we'll put our octopus on, and we'll just use some Stampin' Dimensionals. I love Stampin' Dimensionals to just add that extra lift up off my card. And I will probably, well, no, not probably, I'm going to put, let's do 3 on here. Again, I like them to just stay adhered, and you know, what's an extra, after all that work you put into the card, it's kind of nice to know it's going to stick. And we're just going to set it about right there. All right, and we're not quite finished yet because again, it's vintagey and I like it to look that way. So I want to get these metallic pearls, and they come in a pack of silver and gold. We're going to use the gold. You can use whichever ones you want. I like the gold with the copper, and I'm just going to put those in the center of each of these doilies that we stamped. And I love this, again, the copper ribbon. I can just kind of adjust it how I want. And there we go. There is our very vintage, maybe a little bit of steampunk, super fun card that we did with the 2 stamp sets. Again, we used very vintage and Sea of Textures, and this is the card we created. And so you can see it really doesn't take that long to make a really pretty collage style vintage card and do all those layers. I really hope you enjoyed this. Please visit me at My Pastor's Wife Designs or My Pastor's Wife at stampinup.net. I'd love to see you again soon. Thanks.